So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the session on future of EV charging infrastructure. I would say that I'm Kulbhushan Kumar. I'm leading electric mobility at Grand Thornton Bharat, and thank you all for joining us. So we have very distinguished panelists today with us. So before we start, let me introduce themselves. We have Akshat Modi, business lead, Exponent Energy. Thanks. We have Romesh Gupta, MD, Yanti Innovative. We have Vineet Bansal, founder and MD, EV Motors. Thank you. And we have Jaideep Singh Shaktawat, uh, CEO, YoCharge. No, we don't have. Oh, okay. Okay, thank you. Sorry. And Tarun Gaur, Senior Director, Marketing and Communication from Battery Smart. Rajat Malhan, SVB Indo Fast Energy. Thanks. And Ranjit Bhal, CEO Kinetic Communications. So we have the full panel with us today. Thank you so much for joining. So before we start, I'll request each of the panelists to briefly introduce themselves so that each the audience knows about you and the area in which you work, and then we can start the discussion. Over to you.
Thank you, Kulbhushan. Uh, Good afternoon, all. Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having us on this dais. My name is Akshat. I lead business at Exponent. At Exponent, our focus is to simplify energy for EVs. We are a full stack energy company where in EVs we talk about energy, it's batteries and chargers and everything in between. So that's the entire spectrum we play at. Our unique value proposition is that we develop battery and charging solutions that can do 15-minute full charge. So today, our mobile phones don't charge typically in 15 minutes. We are able to charge an entire vehicle 0 to 100% in 15 minutes. And that comes through the entire battery charging. Everything is designed, made in India. We work on three-wheelers, buses. Commercial vehicle is our focus area. That's where we have been present and scaling up there. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Pleasure to be here among distinguished guests. So, our company, Yanti Innovative, is focusing on after sales EV ecosystem, where we are focusing on battery degradation. So, we've been doing this for 5 years. We are doing it commercially for several OEMs, where we do either third party warranty repairs or we refurbish batteries for them. So we have fair idea of how lithium behaves in the Indian summers or in Indian climate, and we do have deep insights as to what should happen and what is not there, and how we can overcome those challenges. And we are also doing energy as a service platform. We are currently engaged with a OEM where we are trying to develop a specific project for them, and we are also focusing on residential EV charging, where we see there is a huge bottleneck of EV adoption, especially in metro cities with multi-story buildings. So happy to discuss as we go along. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, thank you to TVF for providing this platform and the opportunity. Hi, everyone. My name is Jadeep and I'm from YoCharge. So at YoCharge, we are an EV charging and an energy management software as a service company. So what we do is, as these electric vehicles are increasing, there's a new business opportunity that is coming up, which is of charging service providers or charging station operators. So what we do is, like there's Tele for accountants. We provide an ERP platform for these businesses from the same single platform. These businesses can basically launch, operate, and scale their whole business, take care of all stakeholder management, take care of all the business related activities on that. Okay, thank you.
Hello everyone. Am I audible? Yeah. So I'm Tarun Gaur from Battery Smart. I'm heading marketing and communications over there. Battery Smart is one of the leading battery swapping networks in India. We are present across 40 cities with 1500 plus battery swapping stations, where over 60,000 EV users swap their depleted batteries with fully charged ones. And we enable somewhere around 1.25 lakh battery swaps every single day. And to simplify, what we do is whenever a commercial 2 or 3 wheeler, probably a gig worker or a e-rickshaw, is running out of battery, they can simply come to one of our stations and replace their depleted battery with a fully charged one in 3 to 5 minutes. And that's how they can always be on the move, and they can forget about their long charging times or range anxiety or high upfront cost that comes when you couple the battery cost with the vehicle cost. So yeah, so our basically the mission is to make EV usage simple and affordable for the 2 and 3 wheelers in India. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Rajat. I'm from Indo-Fast Energy. Indo-Fast is a 50-50 joint venture between Sun Mobility and IOCL. Uh, we recently got formed with IOCL's investment into Sun Mobility and forming a joint venture in India. So Sun Mobility, I'm sure everyone knows, is also a battery swapping player. We manufacture batteries and our swapping stations. We've obviously integrated with all the top three-wheelers, be it cargo as well as passenger segment, and the top two-wheeler companies. So the vehicles that are sold out in the market or with the dealerships are sort of Sun Mobility integrated. Similar problems is what Battery Smart and us and we are solving of range anxiety as well as a quick swapping. So, a couple of minutes is where you get batteries. As far as numbers are concerned, we are close to about 70,000 vehicles using our batteries. We're close to about 120,000 batteries that are already existing because, an e-rickshaw uses a two battery system, and loader uses a 3 battery, and a passenger 3 battery, and a two-wheeler 1 battery system. That's who we are, and I look forward to sort of interacting with all of you later on. Thanks.
Good afternoon, people. I'm Ranjit. I represent Kinetic Communication. It's a Firodia Group company, around 25 years old. We are EMS and EV powertrain manufacturer. So we have in-house EMS facility, and we also into the EV powertrain manufacturers. So we have in-house charging solutions, powertrain solutions like motor controllers, converters, and clusters. So we are the one-stop solutions for two-wheeler and three-wheeler for complete powertrain. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Vineet Bansal with EV Motors. We are focused on energy solutions as well as charging infrastructure and chargers. Our focus is to look at DC charging and for the two-wheeler and three-wheeler industry, which is primarily driven by AC charging and battery swapping currently. So we are looking at how to expand that into DC charging and creating the DC charging infrastructure for the two-wheeler, three-wheeler industry. So how do we go about creating that ecosystem? And looking forward for this panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for introducing yourself. So just to set the context, I would say that the penetration, as we all know, that the penetration of two-wheeler and three-wheeler is increasing very rapidly. But the challenge depends whether are the charging station accessible, and secondly, are we able to charge our vehicles seamlessly? And I would say that right now in India, we have more than 25,000 public charging stations across the country, but still they're not sufficient. Why I'm saying so? Because when I was working with Ministry of Power, 8 years back, I would say that, we were working and supporting them on the charging infrastructure and coming up with how much charging infrastructure is required in the country. And that time, the vision of the government is that we should be able to charge our vehicle at every nook and corner of the city, the way we are able to charge our mobile. So we still have not reached that stage, and definitely and now over a period of time, it has been proven that the charging infrastructure needs to come first, then only the penetration will happen. So keeping this particular thing in mind, government is also has come up with FAME scheme, FAME 1, FAME 2. Now they have come up with a PM e-drive scheme, in which they have allocated around 2,000 crores amount of subsidy to set up the charging infrastructure across the country. But still, the main challenge, if you talk about setting up the charging infrastructure, there are two main challenges which I foresee. One is that Initially, when you install a charging infrastructure, as I mentioned, charging infrastructure needs to come first. When you put up the charging infrastructure, the utilization of the charger is not as much, uh, is low, I would say that. And the initial few years of the charging infrastructure, they are not, the economics and the viability is less as compared to any other business. Second, I would say that investment which is required for the upstream infrastructure, the cost is very high. So, keeping these two challenges in mind, therefore, what are the gaps and how we can overcome these two challenges? So, what I've done is that I've divided the topic into four different parts. Firstly, like discussing about the universal fast charging standard. So, uh, is there any need that we have one single charging standard for electric two-wheeler and three-wheeler that will help us to have seamless charging infrastructure across the country? Second is that what are the challenges in setting up the charging infrastructure across the country? And third is the interoperability and the battery swapping. Still, we don't see that in the charging infrastructure is interoperable. We need to have so many apps when we have EV vehicles with us. And is battery swapping is a solution which will help us to overcome that. And lastly is the future technologies which are there. So starting with the universal fast charging standard, I would say that in case of four-wheeler and the light commercial vehicles, I would say that we have reached the stage where one can say that standardization has happened, because CCS2 is the only charging protocol which is followed for by most of the OEMs who are manufacturing four-wheelers, cars as well as the light commercial vehicles. But when it comes to two-wheeler and three-wheeler, there are two charging standards. One is the LECCS and second is the LEVDC. And but still, whether these two standards are sufficient to take care of the charging requirement of the two-wheeler, three-wheeler, is there a need to standardize it? That is what we would like to discuss. First, I'll start with Akshat Modi from Exponent Energy. So what I would like to know from you is that this with rapid charging technology which is evolving, how close are we to achieve a universal fast charging standard for two-wheeler and three-wheeler?
Right. Thank you so much for this question. What we look at is, and personally have an opinion on this, is when you talk about mobility in general, mobility is about freedom. So if you're buying an automobile, you want to go whenever you want, wherever you want. You don't want to plan your life around it. In fact, you want mobility to make your life simpler. And as you see the ICE era, which is the last 100 years technology being evolved, you need to take care of what customer preferences have evolved over the last 100 years, which you don't want to go back on that. At the same time, you want to ensure that technology advancements take care into that requirements. So when you look at EVs today, and people talk about fast charging in general, it's a very loose term, because a lot of places 2 hours is considered as fast, 1 hour is considered as fast, 10 minutes is considered as fast. So what exactly is fast? Today, when you go to a petrol station or a CNG station, you typically spend around 10 to 15 minutes into going in and going out there. And you don't plan your life around it, because you know that there is a entire network being available for you whenever you want to go. You want the same sort of experience when you're trying to adopt to EVs, so that today, if I take out a car in the morning, I want to go anywhere across the city, I can go. I don't need to worry about, hey, how much range will I get on the battery? Because practically the problem is not range anxiety. That's what we talk about. The real problem is charging anxiety. Are enough charging stations available? Do I get, are they up and running when I go there? How much time do I spend if I find them up and running? And how economical is it? Because net you want to care about all those parameters when you talk about the entire India going there. So if you look at the last 10 years, a lot of innovations have continued to happen, right from the cell to batteries to charging technologies, where people are pushing boundaries and coming as close to a 10 or a 15-minute charging technology. Today, on a vehicle level, we have already done and proven we have enough thousand vehicles doing 15-minute charging, which is 0 to 100%. Now, when you talk about standardization from that perspective, the industry is very nascent. The markets are very different. CCS2 is not a standard developed by India, but the problems that you look at an Indian market or a US market is very, very different. I'll start from the basics itself. If you talk about a tier 1 city in India and you compare to a tier 1 city in US or Europe, US and Europe, parking is not a big problem as much as in India. Today, if you look at India, a lot of vehicles are parked on the roads. You don't have a dedicated parking and charging facility. So the thought that, hey, I'll move to EV, I'll do overnight charging, just doesn't work for the Indian market itself. So what do? Do I now create enough land, create enough electrical infrastructure to create a new parking and charging facility? No, it will not work in India. India will rely on public charging. When you go to public charging, therein a lot of people will talk about, hey, I do 1 hour charging as fast charging. But does that really work? If I am planning my travel and I go out in the day, I don't want to wait for 1 hour trying to charge my car or any commercial vehicle for that matter itself. I will prefer to do either a 5 minute, 10 minute quick top up and move around. So if that is a constraint for me, I will not go and adopt that. So if I have home charging, yes, I will do that. But if I want a public charging, I will do 15, 20 minute fast charging itself. And this problem is very different from a US or a Europe market to an Indian market. The propensity to pay is also much, much lower. So you don't want to, in US, you go and say, hey, I'll put a 500-mile battery and I will run it. I take care of my entire day's operations. Maybe on highways, when I'm traveling intercity, I will stop for 30 minutes to eat food and I'll do a top up there. India, you can't afford a 500-kilometer worth battery on the vehicle practically because the vehicle cost goes up. And India being a price sensitive market, you don't want to increase the vehicle cost, which is already higher if you compare to a CNG vehicle out there. At the same time, you don't have home parking and home charging, so you're relying on public charging infra to go and adopt that. So net, the problem statement of a European market and Indian market is very, very different. So just adopting a standard which maybe works for Europe doesn't work for India. I'll go a little deeper into that. Like if you talk about voltage platforms in a European or American mindset, it's typically 300, 400, 600, 800 volt platforms. India, if you talk about two-wheeler, three-wheeler, majority of them is 48 volt platform. Now, and I talk specifically about three-wheelers, if you're operating on a 48 volt platform and you typically do a 8 or 10 kilowatt hour battery, which will roughly give you a 100 kilometers range on a single charge. To charge that in 15 minutes, you need 600 to 800 ampere current. First, CSIS2 doesn't work because CSIS2 doesn't support low voltage. So you can't do a 48 volt charging on CSIS2. You then rely on Bharat DC standard or a GBT standard, which works on low voltage. But the maximum current that they can handle is 200 ampere. So even if somebody designs a battery that can maybe, let's say, take a faster charging, you are constrained by the network to not go faster than 1 hour charging. Which means now it's a very India-specific problem. I can't put 500 kilometer range battery. I need a 100 kilometer range battery, but I need a quick top-up charging to run 200 or 300 kilometers if required in that particular day. And a driver will not care about, hey, I will plan my day around it. If he gets demand, he will run 200 kilometers. If he gets demand, he will run 300 kilometers in that day. Because he makes money when he's driving the vehicle more and more and more. And hence, you need to look at that problem statement, look at the market, and let companies evolve and develop solutions, push those boundaries to maybe do an 800 ampere charging solution, a 600 ampere charging solution, a 1000 ampere charging solution, which solves for both economics as well as the operation that the country is going on. So I think the answer that I think is let the industry evolve, let the customer accept, use different technologies. Yes, obviously there should be standards on safety so that safety is not compromised. You do testing at the testing agencies, but trying to say, okay, this standard, because it worked in some other part of the world, will work in India may not be true. The entire landscape is, reset. India was always playing the catch-up game when we were doing an IC vehicle technology development. In EV, a lot of software, a lot of electronics gets involved. India has an upper hand into having a talent on electronics and software. So we can actually take the lead and develop technologies that not only serve for Indian market, but actually go to the world.
Thank you so much, Akshat. I do agree with you. So what has worked in developed country may not work in India because the situation is different and the requirements are different, as we don't have a dedicated parking space. And I do agree with you that you mentioned that let the market evolve. And the way it has evolved, although as I mentioned, there is no standardization for the four-wheeler and the electric cars, but still the market has figured out, and there is one predominantly, I would say that CCS2 is followed by most of the manufacturers, and same thing would also happen, and let the market evolve. But I do want to understand now, the next question is that, is there any technical challenge in having a in achieving this standard, in case we want to have one single standard or there are 2-3 standards? Is there any technical challenge in achieving that? Sorry, I'll just move on to Mr. Rumesh Gupta.
We are talking about standardization of charging protocols across maybe four-wheelers. So as you rightly said that industry has figured out that it's better to adopt CCS2 charging protocol because that gives their vehicle an edge of getting recharged at multiple charging stations. But what I would want to bring into the picture, first of all, let me say that in last 7-8 years we have really grown exponentially. So any critic or any point is only an observation of making it still better. So now, if we talk about what is holding back the standardization, is actually every company is trying to be innovative, and they want to first make themselves innovation driven, and then they build a ecosystem around that technology. But I will give you an example. Like finally, we are using two aeroplanes like Airbus and Boeing, because finally we realized that it's better to have for standardization. It is, and for cost cutting, it's better to have a standard aircraft. Similarly, in EV, uh, once we have some more scale, industry leaders should or policy makers and everybody should come together and see charging as just a way of pumping in the energy to the vehicle. It's a storage which has to deliver, and then the vehicle runs. As of now, what we have also seen, that the same make of vehicle will not get charged from a previous generation of charger, because we are talking about, say, a two-wheeler or three-wheeler, where the standardization is not still not there. So, so we have seen this happening. So what I would want to see is, uh, irrespective of innovation that we are doing, we should that charging protocols, which basically would want to sense the upper cutoff voltage, lower cutoff voltage, and the temperature of the pack. At least this much should be allowed, and charging should become seamless. Rather than it's at the moment, three-wheeler charging is a issue. Uh, uh, like onboard chargers have come, but again the problem is the EVSCs are not universally used, so batteries or the chargers have a problem. So I think it's once we scale up, and then everybody would realize that it's it makes sense to standardize. So it's not a technological challenge. It's like if everybody agrees to create an ecosystem rather than just building around only on innovation. That's my take on the point.
Thank you so much. I fully agree with you. Now, next build on question which comes to my mind is that till the market evolve and it reaches that stage that standardization will come, or standardization will happen automatically or otherwise. Till then, in order to have interoperability between the charger, so what do you think, how we can have interoperability of the chargers so that person who is buying a two-wheeler or three-wheeler is feel that he can get his vehicle charged at any of the charging station? So I'll just move on to Mr. Uh, sorry, Jaideep. Thank you.
Yeah. So yes. So I think to extend the point, what they are saying that the basically the evolution, the standardization process is an evolutionary one. It would be innovation over the period of time, and it would be evolutionary. And yes, of course. In future we would go to an you can say an standardized protocols on that, which we can see on the car front, or on the four-wheeler front, right? Because of the four-wheeler front, many of these companies, many of the individuals started with their own sort of development, and eventually sort of settle down into CCS2 being an global this thing, right? On that side. So similarly on that sort, for two-wheelers and three-wheelers also, I think it is a very early stage, right, where we are today, and that is where most of the innovation is happening inside the system or inside the companies or an individual level. And with time, this innovation will propel outside the companies, will go outside the companies, as more of these people who have innovated in one company go to some other company, bring forward their knowledge to some other company. A lot of percolation of thought, lot of percolation of engineering, a lot of percolation of ideology will take place, and eventually the standardization would come. Now if we look at the complete picture, there are like multiple layers. So in terms of EV charging, there is a hardware level, then there is the battery chemistry level, and then there is the application or the EV user level, right? So when we talk about interoperability and when we talk about software, which you are particularly asking, the innovation or the standardization at the battery level, the standardization at technology level, at the EV level will come later. It would take time, but software meanwhile can function as a very quick tool to bring in interoperability. uh, just to give you an example, like we have about 20-25 odd CPOs that we have integrated on our platform. So any EV user who is using one application can seamlessly use network of a network or the charger of other charging network through the same application. So they don't need to download multiple mobile app, they don't need to download multiple wallets, they don't need to subscribe this thing. They can just subscribe to one single application, and then from the same application they are able to use multiple charging networks. So like what you do when you are want to book a hotel room, right? You just go to a aggregator kind of Make My Trip or Yatra, and then just book the complete any hotel or any service. You really don't care about like who is the service provider in the end, right? Similar sort of technology or similar sort of things that we are doing today, I think software would lead the development in interoperability right now. And yes, eventually with time, the interoperability and the standardization would percolate to more deeper level or more technology level, which take time, like hardware and the vehicle part, and then eventually standardization come in place.
Yeah, thank you so much. I wanted to move on to the second topic, but before that, I just have a follow-up question on that. You mentioned about the software will take care of the charging protocol, but what about the connecting pins, the connectors? So each vehicles will come with a separate. I believe it comes with a separate connector. So how do you take care of that?
Yes. No, so there is a problem, and that is where the you see the last level of application. So you find a vehicle, you turn up to a charging station, you take a gun out, and then see that the connector is not being inserted in the vehicle. It's not compatible in the vehicle. Uh, the thing is, like for if you see electric four-wheeler scenario in India also, that too started with Chadimo, GBYT, and this thing, and now realized very quickly the four-wheeler, because of the capex of how serious they are and how they have learned from the other outside this thing. Very quickly, everything has moved to CCS2. I think apart from the software the first thing that has to be done is the hardware or the interaction level part, where a certain standardization or a certain mandate has to be made on at least on the connector part, so that everything becomes interoperable, even though in a less efficient manner, right?
Yeah, I do agree with you. Definitely, to start with, even having information of all the chargers which are available across the city, if they are all available at one single platform, that will also help the user. And user will be able to decide like, okay, I can get my vehicle charged at this place rather than this, and then it will help to solve that issue till the time standardization happens or interoperability comes to that stage. And now moving on to the second topic, which is like I will also leave 10-15 minutes for the audience and like to wrap up this whole discussion in around next half an hour so that we have 10-15 minutes for the audience also. So till then, you can just hold on to your questions. I'm just moving on to the second topic of infrastructure expansion. What are the gaps and solutions? So I'll just move on to Mr. Vineet Bansal. So what I wanted to know from you is that right now, how do we build right now? What is your opinion? The biggest infrastructure gaps which are holding back the expansion of the charging infrastructure?
Yeah, so I think the answer for that is also related to the standards that gets adopted in the industry, because until and unless you have the right standards which are been adopted by the industry, it is very difficult to create an infrastructure to support that. So today, for the two-wheeler, three-wheeler industry, because our focus for this session is in two-wheeler, three-wheeler, there are so many different connectors. The OEMs are different OEMs are using different connectors, and also from the protocol, there are more than 100 protocols out there. So last year in September, the government of India has announced the two standards, the Type 6 and Type 7, which is, now the question is, the onus is on the industry, which is the OEMs as well as the charging infrastructure providers, whether they want to adopt this and what will it take to adopt it. The question is, over the last 7 to 8 years, all the OEMs and the infrastructure providers have already made investments. So how do we go about and transition from where we are today to the new standards that have been announced? So unless that is resolved, the infrastructure creation and the investment is going to be tied to a particular OEM or a particular format. So the uniformity, the interoperability is not going to come. So the thing is that the government has taken its own due time to announce the standards. Now the question is, how do we go about implementing this in actuality? So my response to that is that, look, the onus is on the industry to adopt both at the OEM level as well as at the charging infrastructure level to see whether they want to move to this Type 6 solution or not, or Type 6 or Type 7. Both of them provide for low voltage from 20 volts to 120 volts and current up to 120 amps. So the standard that has been announced from a technical perspective. You asked one question earlier on that, is the technology sufficient to address these standards? So when we talk about 15-minute charging, obviously the standard does not address that, from a technology point of view. Because in order to get to 15-minute charging, you need certain current, you need certain voltage, which this standard does not provide. So those are some of the limiting factors. So in my view, I mean, we have to first solve the basics before we go about creating that infrastructure which is interoperable.
Sure, I do agree. Now I'll come to the players who are into the battery swapping and sir see that if the battery swapping meanwhile is able to help us and provide the solution which we are looking at, which is interoperability and the standardization and the seamless charging. So now I'll request Mr. Tarun Gaur to give his thoughts on the battery swap. See, battery swapping is gaining momentum. So how do we ensure interoperability between different OEMs, batteries, and the charging stations?
Thanks for the question. So, in terms of interoperability, what I would say is that when we talk about the form factor, that can be standardized in terms of being compatible with most of the two-wheelers and three-wheelers. However, when we talk about thermal management or battery chemistry or the software, I think they should keep evolving because there is still a lot of scope of innovation in that. And when we talk about battery swapping, what we do right now is that we have over 2 lakh batteries into our system across 1,500 swapping stations in 40 cities. One thing that is common between all the batteries is that they are compatible with all the most of the at least two and three wheelers. And by two and three wheelers I mean the commercial drivers, which are electric rickshaws, which are gig workers or delivery riders. And for them it becomes all the more important because unlike a private user, they have to be on the go all the time. They cannot afford to stop somewhere, charge for a while and lose on the business that they would have made during that time. Instead, what we provide is that they simply come to the station, they pick up a battery which is compatible to their vehicle, and they are on the go within 3 to 5 minutes. So, not just the range anxiety, they are also able to save a lot of time that they can instead spend in their business, in their livelihood, and they can earn more money ultimately. So that's how I feel. And in terms of expansion of infra, so this was also one of the root cause that we thought of this idea of battery swapping, because we understand how high are the real estate costs and how it is difficult to expand charging infra. Whereas with battery swapping, what is possible is that you can have a flexible model where you can open a store in an existing mom and pop store or a parking lot or a commercial space. You can start with a 5-wire battery station and then go up to probably 50 to 100. So as per the availability of existing infrastructure, you can keep expanding instead of relying on finding something new and creating something from the scratch. That is how we actually have a partner-led model where we tie up with these local entrepreneurs
shopkeepers, people who are owning parking lots. We convert them into battery swapping stations. We make them our partners, and we help them run these stations, providing access to charge batteries to all the EV users across these 40 cities that we have. And what we wish is to have one swapping station at every square kilometer, so that wherever there is a need of a charge battery, the user can go there and immediately replace the depleted battery with a fully charged one, and they can be on the move. So that's how we have been able to expand over the last 5 years, and that has been the battery swapping infrastructure that we have built in the last 5 years.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Tarun. Now I'll move on to Mr. Rajat Malan. So since you're also working in the area of battery swapping, so I'll like to ask the similar question. So how can we ensure that battery swapping stations are accessible, first of all, and user-friendly for all demographics?
So it's a good question, right? So battery swapping, and I think Tarun's already sort of spoken a bit about the advantages and how it's done, and I'll talk a little bit about safety, right? So a lot of points have come out when it comes to battery swapping. I think safety is also one critical criteria. I think from a Indofast Sun Mobility perspective, what we do is that the thermal management for these batteries is very, very high from our perspective. I mean, over the last couple of years, before Sun Mobility started, the couple of years we had done a lot of R&D as far as the battery is concerned. So the battery that are manufactured with us at our Bangalore facility have basically gone through sort of 3,000 tests, about 4,000 cycles. We also understand that this is the investment that we're doing is as battery as a service, which is sort of giving the batteries on lease to gig workers and e-rickshaw drivers and loaders and to Amazon, Zomato, Swiggy, etc. So it's important that the life of these batteries are extended to the fullest. Second is our battery swapping infrastructure, which currently in the NCR region is at every square kilometer. Potentially needs to maintain these batteries. So all the data that is coming out of the batteries needs to be accumulated centrally, which potentially means that the battery temperature needs to be below 30 degrees for it to get dispensed, and that is very, very critical for especially in the Delhi heat, right? I mean, if you look at May, June, July, the temperature actually rises up to 40 degrees. The actual surface temperature of the battery will go up to about 50 degrees, right? Because of the way these sort of two-wheelers are running. So it's important that when a battery, when it's at 50 degrees and is put into a station, it's first cooled down before it gets charged. And that's very, very critical for all of us, right? I mean, for Exponent, would sort of also agree to what I'm saying, that it's very, very dangerous if you sort of start charging a battery when it's at a very high temperature. The third and the most critical part is the accessibility and the ease in which the rider gets a battery. That actually for us is very critical. Where for us it's sort of like a key fob which a rider gets, and he taps it, and for a two-wheeler within less than 30 seconds he sort of gets a battery for his sort of for his ride. The other critical part is transparency as far as the energy that he utilizes. Say for example, we are providing a 2.1 kilowatt hour battery for a two-wheeler rider. He only uses 50% of that from an SOC perspective. The charge that he actually does is on a kilowatt hour basis and not on a swap basis. And that's what is very, very critical for us, right? I mean, if the poor guy only uses say 20 or 50 or 60%, we're not going to charge him for the entire 100% capacity that he uses. So those are sort of very important points that we focus on. And as far as interoperability is concerned, is what the topic for this conversation is. I think all of us kind of unanimously sort of agree is that we should not curb innovation when it comes to technology. I mean, we're so nascent. I mean, electric vehicles is so nascent, in a very nascent stage in this country, that it's important that a lot of innovation happens. There's a lot of experimental that happens, and then it's only after a significant amount of time that a call for standardization should take place for either fixed charging or sort of battery swap.
Yeah, thank you so much. Now I'll move on to the last topic of future technologies. So, right now, if you look at the new technologies such as wireless charging and the dynamic charging, that could redefine the how the EVs are actually powered. But however, their feasibility, if you look at the feasibility, cost, and adoption, and the timeline remains uncertain. So, we need to think: are these solutions practical for the Indian market right now? Or should we focus on perfecting the existing infrastructure before we explore futuristic alternatives? So I'll move on to Mr. Ranjit Bhelk about what are your thoughts on the new technologies, and is it the right time, or should we focus first on the perfecting the existing infrastructure which we require?
Yeah. So basically, as Rajat told, that EV altogether is at very nascent stage. So no technology either on the powertrain side or the battery or the charging has reached to its maturity, right? Every technology has to go through the maturity curve, and being EV has become very disruptive market by many entrants. So everybody is bringing its own technology. So as other panelists has told in the beginning, that standardization has to happen on the battery form factor, the connector. So let's develop the standardization first. Let's reach to the maturity of current technology, because bringing new technology will again disrupt the market, right? EV has not reached to its desired penetration yet. We are talking about the EV, but if let's look at the two-wheeler, the penetration is just 6.5%. Three-wheeler, I think it has reached to 25%. Four-wheeler and other commercial vehicles are still lesser on the single digit, right? 3-4%. So what are the problems? It's basically start with mindset. So I think Indian consumers has to work on their mindset technology. So are we really adapting ourselves to the greener, cleaner and sustainable solutions as a EV, or we are looking this as a low cost solution? Okay. Everything what has changed into ICE, say sasta hai EV, right? And now we are not able to spend on the EV, bringing it to the premium technology. We are not putting efforts in putting the CPOs, charging infrastructures. We are not putting efforts on maturity of the technology which we have currently. So I think India as a market, we need to focus on getting the maturity to the two-wheeler, three-wheeler, which is having the highest level of adaptation might happen. And the two-wheeler and three-wheeler market consumers, the costs, we can match the ICE as quickly as possible. Being battery is getting better and better with technology. So let's focus on two-wheeler, three-wheeler, getting maturity of the technology rather than bringing the fast charging, bringing on-the-wheel charging, the Wi-Fi charging, and so on. Right? India infrastructure doesn't suit as of now to newer technology which Europe, US, and probably China has adopted.
Sure, sure. I do agree with you. Now, I would like to open the floor to the audience. If you would like to ask any question to the panelists, I think we can just take one or two questions. If anyone wants to ask any question, yeah, please kindly introduce yourself and then you can ask the question to the panelists.
Thank you so much for running through the battery charging and swapping solutions which are available in the market. I have a very basic question. Like most of the charging happens through the grid connectivity. Like we are dependent upon the grid electricity. And if I'm not mistaken, we have limitations of the capacity of the electricity which we are generating today. Is there any solution we are working upon which can be these charging stations could be self-sustainable, like they can generate their own electricity? That is the question.
Answer.
I think the most obvious solution is to couple it with some renewable source of energy. So solar can become a enabler, and solar and EV can simultaneously partner, and they can be they can reduce the load on the grid. This is a straightforward take that is happening right now.
Yeah. So a fluctuation on the grid voltage is a major cause right now. So it can be managed through the renewable energy sources coupled with the wind energy, the solar energy, and also the battery pack, which require the generators, right? So basically, we should not depend only on the grid. We should find, if we want to spread this charging network, the renewable energy is the best part of getting it self-sustained.
I have a very quick, short answer to this. India is no more a power deficit country. We are a power surplus country. So net power that India generates is actually in line with what our demand is. So keeping that aside, your whole point is that, hey, grid will have fluctuations because there's a different time of day, your generation and usage is different. Now, there are a lot of solutions where you can store the energy that has been generated, whether it is solar, whether it is wind, whether it is even coal, at a different point of a day itself. So the whole idea is, hey, if I'm having more generation at a particular time, how do I have solutions to store that energy and use that energy when I don't have enough generation taken care of? Because the energy mix in the country will keep on changing. You will want to have more solar, which will be, you will generate more of that in the day. You will have more of wind in certain areas, which are more feasible, where you have more in the night time of generation for wind itself. You continue to have your coal contracts, which will run a 20-25-year contracts out there, and you need to manage a certain level of production capability to make that profitable out there. So the energy mix is something that the power generation companies, the government will keep on focusing on. For companies who are operating charging stations, if they want to store energy, they just keep back-end buffering systems, have battery banks, store that energy from the grid itself, and utilize it when your grid is having a shortfall on that.
Thank you so much. I think now we'll have to wrap up because we are behind the schedule. So I'd like to conclude that the main takeaway from the discussion is that, first of all, for on the interoperability and the standardization, is that collaboration among the OEMs and the standard setting bodies and the international partners is essential to drive the progress, and it will evolve with time. And also on the interoperability is that, yes, to start with a unified for the real-time data sharing and the app-based solution will help us to reduce the range anxiety and enhance the user experience. And I do agree on the future technologies. Yes, this is not the right time, but definitely we need to focus on, first of all, perfecting the existing infrastructure and then move on to the new technologies. Please.
I have just a closing remark that if everybody thinks about the outcome of the technology that they are doing, it should be helpful for the customer, and customer should if we take that into account, a lot of things can be sorted out. Because a lot of two-wheelers and three-wheeler users are not very happy about the user experience they are having. So I think this thought should be there rather than just focusing on innovation and building walls around it, and then the customers getting stuck with the technology. Thank you.
So thank you so much. So with this, I'd like to conclude, and I would like to thank all the panelists for their contribution and insights which they have provided. And also thank you for joining this session. Thank you so much.